LOC contracts, presented by Mr. Lê Thế Hùng, Managing Director, CNC Council and member of Interim Committee of SCL Vietnam. And we have another section from 3 to 3:30 that is about the comparison of NEC and FIDIC. And after that, you have 30 minutes for Q&A. And to start the seminar on construction, I would like to invite Ms. Lisa Bang to give the opening speech. Over to you, Lisa.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen in the UK, and xin chào, good afternoon, everyone in Hanoi and around Vietnam. Can everyone hear me? Am I unmuted? Yes, great, thank you. Okay, great. So, Mr. Dam Duc Bien, General Director of the Ministry of Construction, representatives from department across the Ministry of Construction, representatives from the Society of Construction Law and International Arbitration Centre, and ladies and gentlemen joining this event here, both in the room at the Ministry of Construction and virtually by Zoom, and I can see quite a few of you dialed in. It is my pleasure to be here today representing the British Embassy in Hanoi to open the UK-Vietnam seminar on construction contracts, New Engineering Contract, or NEC as we call it for short. My sincere thanks goes to the Ministry of Construction, and in particular, the State Agency of Construction Economics, the Society of Construction Law Vietnam, the Vietnam International Arbitration Centre, and NEC for co-hosting this event with the British Embassy. And my thanks also to speakers from Mott MacDonald and the NEC user group, who I can see online. So we all know that Vietnam is currently at a very exciting development juncture with ambitious plans for infrastructure development. And in such a context, a robust legal framework coupled with good international governance of construction contracts will be critical for the implementation of construction and infrastructure projects, thus enabling a predictable and attractive business environment for the Vietnamese construction sector, which sets a really good stage for international cooperation. The UK, as I hope you all know, has extremely strong expertise in the construction sector, particularly around ensuring construction contracts are attractive and equitable. We work globally. UK is home to NEC, which creates new standards for international construction contracts, and that's what we're here to discuss today. NEC has become the public sector's contract of choice in the UK and globally, and is currently being used for nearly all projects procured by national and local government bodies and agencies in the UK. And we want to establish that reputation and extend that further into countries like Vietnam. Internationally, a great example of NEC application is the fast-track delivery of $500 million for new and upgraded facilities for the Lima Pan America Games that took place last year in Peru. And many companies who are with us today, including Mace, Arup, and 4Global, were heavily involved in the project. This is something we're really proud of, and it provides an excellent case study to work from. So I'm extremely impressed that over 100 participants are attending today, both on and offline. And this is the nature of things going forward. But I think the hybrid element really works, that we've got people gathered together here in Hanoi, and then we've got others joining from around Vietnam and the UK. So I really hope that you have useful and fruitful discussions today around why NEC could be the option of choice for future. There's lots to discuss here, and I know our experts are happy to take questions from the audience. And just so we can raise the profile of what we're doing in the UK and hope that NEC can become the new normal in Vietnam. So, Xin Cam On, thank you to you all, and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Lisa. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Dam Duc Bien to give the opening speech. Mr. Bien.
simultaneous.
Hiện tôi cứ dùng cái máy có thể mượn máy chị cho nó mời em thông cảm.
Kính thưa bà Lisa Banh, trưởng bộ phận thương mại đầu tư Đại sứ quán Anh. Kính thưa các đại diện đến từ Hiệp hội Kỹ sư xây dựng Anh. Kính thưa toàn thể các quý vị tham gia hội thảo. Thực hiện chức năng được Bộ trưởng giao Cục Kinh tế xây dựng trong vai trò là cơ quan quản lý nhà nước về kinh tế xây dựng đã liên tục nghiên cứu xây dựng và hoàn thiện các thể chế liên quan đến quản lý chi phí đầu tư xây dựng. Trong đó có một nội dung quan trọng là hợp đồng xây dựng. Năm 2010 thì lần đầu tiên các quy định về quản lý hợp đồng xây dựng cũng đã được thể chế hóa thành một cái nghị định riêng, là nghị định số 37/48, và đến nay đã được thay thế bằng nghị định số 37 năm 2015. Về cơ bản thì hành lang pháp lý để quản lý hợp đồng xây dựng đã được củng cố và hoàn thiện nhằm tạo dựng thị trường xây dựng cạnh tranh công bằng, minh bạch, đảm bảo quyền lợi và lợi ích hợp pháp của các chủ thể liên quan thông qua việc quy định cụ thể các cái loại hợp đồng xây dựng, hình thức hợp đồng, điều kiện áp dụng, phương thức thanh toán và điều chỉnh hợp đồng xây dựng, qua đó góp phần bảo đảm tiến độ, chất lượng, chi phí hợp lý của các cái dự án đầu tư xây dựng. Phân định được rõ quyền và nghĩa vụ của các cái chủ thể tham gia hợp đồng cũng như các cái chủ thể có liên quan để nâng cao nhận thức, trách nhiệm của các bên trong triển khai thực hiện những nghĩa vụ đã cam kết trong hợp đồng. Quy định cụ thể về thưởng hợp đồng, phạt vi phạm hợp đồng và những giải quyết tranh chấp hợp đồng xây dựng, qua đó góp phần giảm thiểu những sai phạm, tranh chấp, vướng mắc phát sinh trong quá trình quản lý triển khai thực hiện hợp đồng. Thêm vào đó, trên cơ sở kế thừa những kết quả đạt được từ các cái giai đoạn trước, như quá trình tích lũy kinh nghiệm quản lý nhà nước, kiến thức thu được thông qua các cơ quan, tổ chức quốc tế, các cái quy định về quản lý hợp đồng xây dựng tại Việt Nam cũng đã được ngày càng hoàn thiện theo hướng cơ chế quản lý và mẫu hợp đồng xây dựng cơ bản đã được xây dựng trên nền tảng thông lệ quốc tế phổ biến trên thế giới nhằm thu hẹp khoảng cách quy định giữa trong nước và thông lệ quốc tế, qua đó có phần thu hút sự quan tâm tham gia của các nhà đầu tư, nhà thầu nước ngoài. Các cái quy định về hình thức hợp đồng phi truyền thống như turnkey, APC cũng đã được ban hành nhằm đa dạng hóa các cái hình thức thực hiện, qua đó đáp ứng được yêu cầu thực tiễn triển khai áp dụng của nhiều loại dự án đầu tư xây dựng, từ dự án phổ thông cho đến những dự án có bản chất đặc thù phức tạp hoặc theo yêu cầu công nghệ cao. Theo đó, để tiếp tục hoàn thiện các quy định của pháp luật trong lĩnh vực này nhằm tuân thủ các cái quy định của luật số 62 sửa đổi bổ sung một số điều của luật xây dựng mới được Quốc hội Việt Nam thông qua, cùng với việc tổng kết đúc kết những cái kinh nghiệm thực tiễn qua cái việc triển khai các cái quy định của pháp luật về hợp đồng xây dựng tại nghị định số 37, Cục Kinh tế xây dựng đã nghiên cứu, xây dựng và hiện đang chuẩn bị trình Chính phủ dự thảo nghị định bổ sung một số điều của nghị định 37 năm 2015 quy định về hợp đồng xây dựng. Kính thưa quý vị đại biểu, với mục tiêu nhằm mở rộng thêm phạm vi nghiên cứu, tích lũy kiến thức, thông lệ quốc tế về hợp đồng xây dựng, Bộ Xây dựng đã giao Cục Kinh tế xây dựng phối hợp với Văn phòng Đối ngoại và Thỉnh Nguyện chung Hiệp hội Kỹ sư xây dựng Anh Quốc cùng với nhóm nghiên cứu pháp luật và hợp đồng xây dựng Việt Nam tổ chức thực hiện hội thảo với mục tiêu nhằm tuyên truyền về mẫu hợp đồng NEC cũng như đánh giá so sánh giữa các mẫu hợp đồng xây dựng tiên tiến theo thông lệ quốc tế, làm cơ sở hoàn thiện quy định hiện hành của pháp luật đối với lĩnh vực này. Tôi tin rằng với những kiến thức, kinh nghiệm thu được từ buổi hội thảo cũng như những ý kiến đóng góp chuyên môn của các chuyên gia, quý vị tham dự hội thảo sẽ là căn cứ quan trọng để hỗ trợ Cục Kinh tế xây dựng trong việc tiếp tục hoàn thiện các quy định pháp luật về hợp đồng xây dựng, qua đó góp phần hình thành thị trường xây dựng công bằng, bình đẳng, thu hút được sự quan tâm và sự tham gia của các nhà đầu tư, các nhà thầu nước ngoài. Cuối cùng, tôi xin chúc các quý vị đại biểu sức khỏe, chúc hội thảo thành công tốt đẹp. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
Okay, I presume that's my cue to start. Is that correct? Give me a nod, Richard. Okay. Okay, let me share my screen then. Okay, excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. So hopefully you can see my slides. Richard, I can see your face. Just nod. You can see my slides? Give me a nod. There we go. Brilliant. So the difficulty I have in my enthusiasm is speaking slow enough for the interpreter to turn into to good English. And my apologies, but Lisa didn't tell me it was earrings day, so my earrings nothing like as impressive as Lisa's. But never mind. So I get the easy one. Richard gets the more difficult one. So my session is about an introduction to NEC4 contracts, and we're a little bit slightly behind time. Let's see if I can catch us back up somewhat. So that's a little bit about me. I'm now based in Hong Kong, not too far away. As and when the planes are running again, I hope to see you all in Vietnam very, very soon. So pretty well versed in NEC, also act as a mediator and dispute resolution advisor. But the session is not about me, it's about the product called NEC, which is also called NEC. Interestingly, South Africa calls the product NEC. I call it NEC, but anyway, anything goes, doesn't it? NEC, NEC, all fine. So I'm simply going to talk about these three things. I'm going to look at basically what is this thing that we call NEC? How has it come about? What is it? Where did it come from? Why did it come from? What is it used for, etc. And that will feed me on to some of the key features of NEC itself, some of the, if you like, the selling points, why use it, and then finish off with a couple of slides on benefits. I could probably talk forever on all of these things, especially the features and the benefits, but of course that is not what today is about. So, who, what, why, where, etc. And this is being recorded, Facebook of all places, which is quite interesting. But I'm assuming the video will be shared to those that subscribe to this after, and also I would imagine these slides will be available too, perhaps separately. So this thing called NEC, there's a lot of it. There's a number of documents that make up the complete package, which is NEC. In fact, it's so voluminous these days. They're actually two large box sets that you put them under your arm. They're quite a weight. So they are a suite of documents. In these documents, we have contracts, user guides, and flowcharts. In fact, we have what are called flowcharts. We map out the processes, and we use that as part of the drafting process to validate the adequacy of the drafting. But actually, we don't include the flowcharts in the boxes these days. Save a bit of paper. They're available electronically only. So in those two box sets, we have a box of contracts and we have a box of user guides that support the practitioner's use of those contracts. So these contracts are actually aimed at professional contract management. We do not pitch these contracts at the small sort of homeowners level where the homeowners perhaps are looking for a small extension to their property. So we're pitching it at those projects that need a degree of professional management. No doubt all of you on the call are professionals. So it is preparation of documents by professionals, management by professionals. That's the market that we're pitching it at. So we have contracts and user guides. They are for providing goods, works, or services. So we have contracts for providing goods, where you can engage a manufacturer, a factory, for example, a contract for procuring works, where you might engage a contractor to design and or build something, and a contract for providing services, where you may engage a consultant to give some advice, do some design, write some reports, or actually a contractor to do things like facilities management, term services, clean highways, that sort of thing. And a little bit more detail on each of those a bit later. But just for now, I think that in this, it's a comprehensive suite of documents for providing goods, works, and services. In any sector, this is used in oil and gas, petrochemicals, buildings, civils around the world to different degrees, any location. So geographically, it's very difficult getting data from countries, but I would say at any one time, there's probably at least 30 countries around the world using NEC contracts. Some are pretty prolific users, such as Hong Kong, UK, South Africa, and I would actually say parts of New Zealand as well. Some are occasional users. We heard earlier about Peru, also used in Antarctic, not the Arctic. So, you know, habitual users, occasional users. For any level of the supply chain, so you can actually use this as a head contract. There are contracts for use as a head contract, the main contract, contracts for use as subcontracts or sub-subcontracts. There is one international contractor I'm aware of at a large international airport that the terms and conditions were so onerous at the head contract level, they decided they could not pass them on to the supply chain, so used NEC contracts. Very successful projects, very successful outcome. So you don't necessarily have to use all of these contracts throughout the supply chain. You can actually pick and mix them to suit, you know, wherever you are in the supply chain. That said, of course, an old saying, you know, a term that people like to use often is back-to-back relationships, back-to-back contracts. So if you want a back-to-back contract, there are contracts in this suite to enable you to do that. So as I mentioned, any level of the supply chain, also not aimed at any particular sector. So just as viable in the private sector as it is in the public sector. Probably on balance again, as I say, statistics are difficult to find, but probably more commonly used in the public sector than in the private sector. Certainly here in Hong Kong, there's an expectation that all contracts since I think it was 2017, something like that was the date, all contracts will be on the basis of NEC or NEC, whichever one you prefer. Lisa also used those words. I'm not allowed to use the word new engineering contract, but as you used it, then I will. And actually it's shown there in the timeline of 1993. So this contract, the first edition came out in 1993, is not so new anymore. In fact, there was a report done by a guy in the UK called Latham, Sir Michael Latham. And Sir Michael actually said, get rid of the word new. In fact, get rid of the word new and get rid of the word engineering, because new only lasts so long, but New England is okay, New Zealand, but never mind. And engineering conjures up this image of that the perception that you can only use this for engineering contracts. We didn't quite listen to him because you can see in 1995 we're still using the term new engineering contracts, but over time new engineering contracts are shrunk just down to NEC. So the brand name, be it NEC or NEC, is just that. It's merely a brand name. Each document within the brand or the suite has its own title or name. So NEC is now just the name of a series of products. We're in our, it doesn't say NEC4, but we're in our fourth version of NEC. So first edition 1993, second 1995, third edition 2005, fourth edition 2017. As Apple, Samsung, and the rest of organizations, I'm sure there's an NEC5 on the table, but maybe that's 5, 10 or so years away. We will see. We will see how the world evolves. And interestingly, changes in these subsequent editions sometimes match societal changes, you know, and technology changes. So, you know, there was no such thing as BIM in 1993, and here it is now and has been for the last few years. Key performance indicators probably were not very frequent in 1993, but here they are now. So, you know, over time, society changes, society emerges, technology changes, our needs and interests change, and we hope to lead those things through the contract. So we would like to think we're a leader and not a follower. We would like to think that we, you know, we have requirements in the contract that will shape our future industry. So what do we ultimately want? Richard's going to do a comparison later between NEC and FIDIC, but I would suggest if you spoke to NEC and FIDIC, we will both have an identical outlet of a project. We both want successful outcomes. We want safe working, we want good productivity, good efficiency, happy people, happy clients, happy contractors. We want exactly the same thing. We want a successful outcome of our projects, except we have a completely different view on how best to achieve that. So we are people-based, project management orientated, and maybe Richard will tell you the opposite for FIDIC later. So we believe in people doing the right things, and those right things are what we embed in the contracts. So this is a progressive, forward-thinking, proactive set of terms and conditions that are effectively project management orientated. So our different contracts, I apologize, I haven't told you what these mean anywhere, and these are all acronyms, but I don't expect you to remember this. What the point of this slide is to show you an array of different contracts within the suite. So from the top, we have a professional service contract for buying, usually professional services from a consultant, write reports, do a design, etc. We have then the most popular contract used within the NEC suite, the engineering and construction contract that abbreviates to ECC. We have then a supply contract if you wish to procure some very, usually substantial pieces of equipment. I've worked on one fairly recently with the government of Guernsey, who wanted a mobile crane for their port. Speaking with somebody in Latvia yesterday, significant railway project, considering procuring rolling stock and the like for railways. So different contracts for buying different things. The top one, people; second one, works; third one, goods. Term service contract. Once we build an asset, we need to maintain it. We need to maintain highways, schools, roads, railways, all sorts of things. In a building context, you might have FM, facilities management, hard and soft FM, managing catering, cleaning, security, all sorts of things like that. So different contracts for buying different things. The most progressive contract we have is the next one, ALC Alliance contracts, which to me is the top of the tree in terms of collaboration. Now, when anybody in the world can use this successfully, probably time for me to retire. So it's the pinnacle of collaboration. I've yet to work with any organisation who I think can truly carry off an alliance contracts, but I hope to be changed over time. There is a very interesting clause in the alliance contract which says the parties agree not to sue each other. This is a multi-party contract. Parties agree not to sue each other unless there is bad faith or corruption. So negligence, uselessness, breach is not grounds for suing. So what organisation is happy right now today without blinking an eye to sign up to that? But to me, it's aspirational. So it's a great target for us as an industry to first of all learn how to be honest, to tell the truth, to gain increased levels of trust, to learn how to collaborate and work with each other for the goodness of the project. And as we get better and better in that, we will demand more things. And I think we will demand alliancing. So to me, some way off. Those countries that perhaps cannot afford the capital outlay of a project might be interested in a DBO, design, build, operate contracts. And then below are 3 or 4 versions of some short contracts based upon the ones above. So the differential is low risk and straightforward projects. If you have a low risk and straightforward professional service contract, there's something called a PSSC, which is a knockdown version of the PSC. PSC full of bells and whistles for complex management. PSSC is for the more simple procurement of professional services. And likewise, some short contracts there. I'm not going to go through them in the time that I've got. There's a framework contract. Those of you that like frameworks, I'm a big fan of frameworks. Long-term relationship with a limited number of suppliers to eke out improvements, be highly collaborative and trustworthy, and achieve some great outcomes. And then finally, should things go wrong, there is a contract where you can engage a dispute resolution service provider, if you like, sort of dispute resolution service contract, but you engage a dispute resolver. We have an escalating approach for resolving disputes. We have what's called senior representatives between the parties. And if that doesn't work, adjudication. If that doesn't work, arbitration or litigation, whichever is your preferred option. Now, disputes are not an automatic outcome of NEC contracts. In fact, I've worked with NEC contracts for 25 years. Not one of the contracts I've worked on in any country in the world has ever been near formal dispute resolution. So it is not obviously an automatic outcome. So why is it different? Why are these things different? Why are they so different to traditional contracts, for example, FIDIC? Well, they at the time of creating, the person who created these contracts, someone called Dr. Martin Barnes, he did not want to take the best of the rest that were out there, but create something from scratch using a clean piece of paper, using modern day thoughts, modern day principles. Most standard forms of contracts have their roots back perhaps into the late 1940s, early 1950s, which, as good an era as it may well have been, it didn't have such things as project management and risk management as we know them today. Okay, so it's a very different basis. I mean, most of the contracts, I think, expect failure and are drafted on the basis of the expectation that things will go wrong. Why not set your contracts up to actually achieve a successful outcome? And that's one of the key features of NEC. So the main objectives, what it is trying to do is to get you to manage contracts better. I actually think we administer contracts, not manage contracts. We have to learn how to manage contracts far better than we have done in the past. The objectives of the drafters is to produce something which is clear and simple. Pitch it such that English is a person's secondary language, not their primary language, and make sure the documents itself are flexible. So the question is, does it achieve that? Certainly in terms of payment, in terms of flexibility in payment, there's choice. In most of the contracts, the NEC contracts, certainly the main contracts, you have plenty of choice. What should be my payment mechanism? You can choose from an array, 6 different pricing mechanisms in front of you. You can choose from lump sum through remeasurable quantities, 2 types of target cost, and 2 types of cost reimbursement contract. The bottom 4, C, D, E, and F are basically cost-based contracts, open book cost-based, which is very attractive these days as more and more societies want that auditable, transparent, open book approach. And why not? In measures for anti-fraud, anti-corruption and things like that, I think even the World Bank are actually realizing now that open book is better than closed book. The closed book contracts are options A and B. Now, I'm not saying that they induce or cause fraud. It's just that when things are closed and you can't see transactions, then the wrong things might be happening. You choose at tender stage as a client. The first choice is whichever of my contracts is most appropriate within the NEC suite. Once you pick that, for example, here, let's say we want to design and build something, we then say which of these options are most appropriate for this particular contract. How should I pay the contractor? We then have some more choice. I like choice. Which of these, what are called secondary options, should we have? Okay, so building on the fact that NEC contracts are flexible, who do I want to take the risk of inflation? Who do I want to take the risk of changing the law? All of these I see as principles, if you like, that you need to decide at tender stage who is best placed to take the risk of each of these things that are in front of you. Should I use these as a means to incentivize the contractor? Now, we often have in contracts, most contracts I see around the world, negative cash flow, retention, delay damages or liquidated damages, parent company guarantee, performance bonds. I call those comfort blankets, and we have those because everybody says, well, that's what we always have. Well, that's what you always have doesn't mean it's right for the future. And those comfort blankets come at a price. They drive, in my opinion, the wrong behavior, and they cost a lot of money. Now, if you abandon all those 5 comfort blankets I've just mentioned, and you actually pay for works up front, then I'll probably get you a 10 or 15% saving from the tender price that is now currently. But that's quite a risk, isn't it? You imagine paying up front for works rather than paying on a monthly basis with negative cash flow to the contractor. But these are the things you can do with this contract. There is no end to its tremendous flexibility. Decide if you want sectional completion. Decide if you really need delay damages. If you have delay damages, why not have a bonus for early completion, X6? If time is so critical to you and will cost a lot of money should the asset be late in delivery, incentivize early completion. Clauses on information modeling, fairly limited in those clauses. They talk about an information execution plan and liability for erroneous data provided by the client to the contractor. You can also terminate on a whim if you use X11, but there is a premium payable for that. A clause I love, X12, that I rarely find people use because they worry about creating a legal partnership, and this does not create a legal partnership, is multi-party collaboration. Why would you not want to sit around, if you were the client, the 4, 5 or 6 absolutely key supply chain members and create some sort of relationship where they try and achieve your objectives and you try and achieve their objectives? A very grown-up way of thinking. A problem I find in the industry, we are all adults, yet we act like infants. One day, hopefully, we will mature, grow up, and act in an adult capacity. Let us see. More flexibility. You can have that performance bond if you want it, but it's not cheap. Maybe up to 2% of your tender total is made up with a performance bond. I said, wow, that's a lot of money. Most contractors I know do not even make 2% profit. So that's such a significant amount of money to go on one thing. Would advance payment to the contractor be a good option on your contract? Limit of liability, probably the number one talking point in most contracts for the last 10 years is limits of liability. There are provisions for that. Key performance indicators. I love X20, where we can set about trying to introduce KPIs that matches the client's values and visions. If you have a client desperate to be that zero carbon client, or the one that wants apprenticeships to be developed out of schools or other such things, use KPIs to line up the contractors, to the visions and values of the client. Be creative with your KPIs. Early contractor involvement. Only this morning, I did another webinar on early contractor involvement, X22. Personally, I'm a great fan of negotiating contracts. I'm not a fan of competitive tendering. Pull me up on this later with questions, but what do you get with competitive tendering? You pick the lowest person, you pick the one who's made the biggest mistake. You are already probably going to drive the wrong behavior when picking the organization who's made a fundamental mistake in the pricing of their contract. We also introduce what are called why clauses in each country. We make sure there's nothing in legislation which is in conflict with NEC contracts, and we have developed some New Zealand clauses, some UK clauses, and just about doing some for Ireland, Australia, and one day in Hong Kong because of their security payment legislation. So the same question would have to go to Vietnam ultimately. Are there any requirements in law that need certain provisions in the contract? You are free to put your own conditions in. Take care. We call them Z clauses, infamous Z clauses. You are free to change some of these provisions if you so wish to. So in terms of drafting principles, when people are drafting these contracts, we try and use only as many words are as needed. We try and give words their natural meaning, that it's not written by lawyers for lawyers. These are written by practitioners like Richard and myself who try to use good, readable, understandable words. So we use words readers are likely to understand. The English language doesn't help sometimes though, does it? So if I say the word there are 3 ways of spelling and using there, but never mind. We do try to achieve that goal if at all possible. We also try to keep sentences down below 40 words. Ask Richard to talk to you about clause 66 of FIDIC later. That I can see it's one sentence, an entire page long. I've still never got to the end of it without falling asleep. So you've got to keep people entertained, if you like, with with readable clauses, readable, understandable clauses. It's written in the present tense, use the active voice. The word shall only appears once. There's an expectation that we manage the contract in real time. A real challenge to us culturally is going from reactive hindsight to proactive foresight. And again, maybe in question time we'll talk about that a bit more. So what do we end up with? Clauses such as this, really quite simple. The contractor provides the works in accordance with the scope. That's it. That to me is the most important clause in the contract. How many words are there? 8 or so, something like that. Whatever's in the scope, you have to provide as a contractor. What is a defect? In the professional service contract, a defect is a part of the service which is not in accordance with the scope. Actually, sorry, that should say or the applicable law. I'll change that later. Third one, the supplier does not do a corrupt act. In fact, I drafted the anti-corruption provisions, and I have to confess, my first go at this had about 80 words, and it probably took me 8 hours to write this sentence. And I think my daughter could have written this at the age of 5. So it started off very complicated, ends up with 3, 6, 8 words. The supplier does not do a corrupt act. So simple language, simple, understandable, readable language. So I've probably only got, I was trying to keep it a little bit in time, probably another 5 minutes. Some key features. So we have 2 clauses to start us off with, clause 10.1, 10.2. Clause 10.1 asks us to act as stated in the contract, demands that we follow the contract. That would be a good thing, wouldn't it? I've still never seen or heard of a dispute where parties actually follow the contract and still end up in dispute. 10.2 is a good faith clause. Humphrey Lloyd QC once said, this clause talks about acting in the spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. He said it's a strand of good faith. I'm not going to argue with the QC, good enough for me. The problem that society has around the world is the acceptance of good faith as a concept. And sadly, many jurisdictions do not act in good faith. And I think that's very sad. So France has to, UK doesn't, Hong Kong doesn't, New Zealand does, Canada does, etc. If good faith is embedded in the jurisdiction, much easier to accept the concept. We communicate in a certain way. There are rules of how to communicate, and you cannot communicate verbally. You must communicate in a form that can be read, copied, and recorded. We're also finding that the software industry is very interested in net contracts, and they've helped map out the processes to help us communicate in a way expected of the contract. Good news in my opinion. What is called the jewel in the crown, early warnings. So there's an expectation that we tell each other of problems in good time, to sit around the table, which could be virtually these days, put the problem in the middle of the table and solve the problem in the interests of those who will be affected by it. So again, acting like adults, honest, the honest broker telling each other of problems and trying to fix them. I'll leave you with the sentence, you can think about it. There's only one client I've read about that got the concept of risk management, truly got the concept, and that was BAA, British Airports Authority. Once upon a time, their opening paper said, all risk is client risk. And I immediately said, that's rubbish, because you parcel up risk and give it the contractor, and therefore it's contractor's risk. But their meaning, when you read the paper and understand it, you may well do that. But when the contractor's risk occurs, who else suffers? The client. The client. It's a false position to think that you have passed risk on to a client just through words in the contract. We have a program, we have an expectation of a highly detailed program to be submitted by the contractor on a regular basis. That is there, that is up to date and realistic and reflects their intention of how they intend to go about providing the works. An invaluable management tool. Many of these things, you see in my last bullet, it's about management information. These are tools that give us management information for us to do something about. The last bullet, though, last but one bullet, talks about conversation events, which is our idea of change management, of claims, of variations and things like that. We expect very close to a real-time approach to assessing change. First contract I was on, no change was agreed, until the end of the job, when the contractor literally finished the job. Took about 2.5 years from that point to agree the final account. What a tragic waste of resource. My second job, 2 years to build, 4 years to agree a final account. That is nonsense, absolutely nonsense. So we have to invest, we have to go do the final account, but we have to do it in real time during the job itself to give businesses high quality management information to do something about the problems that may exist on the job, or exploit the opportunities. You know, risk isn't just about bad things, it can be good things as well. Two better words than risk are, in my opinion, threat and opportunity. Don't forget the opportunities that exist in contracts. And of course, don't forget to deal with the threats. So 2 last slides, if I might, some benefits. A number of clients have realized that actually you can standardize the entirety of your procurement with NEC contracts. Whether you are buying goods, works, or services, you can engage your suppliers on a consistent basis. You know, fantastic basis for doing business. It's very readable. That's got to be a benefit to actually be able to read it and hopefully understand it. Certainly if English is not your primary language, it's got to be good. The contract, I think, or in my opinion, it does, it gets people doing more of the right things. What are the right things? Good programs, notification of early warnings, solving early warnings, telling me about conversation events in good time, agreeing those conversation events in good time. All of those are, you know, more of the right things at the right time. So doing the right things at the right time. The whole contract is about setting yourself up to succeed, not dealing with failures. Of course, it has provisions for where there are defects or where there are disputes, but we're about dispute avoidance, not dispute resolution. I think it challenges the norm, and it's very interesting watching the norm migrate to NEC principles. So here's my prediction that in about 10 years' time, you will look at different families of standard forms and they will look like NEC, because NEC is the progressive contract. It's where they know they need to be looking forward. Now, I love it to bits. It's my favorite contract by miles, but it's only one ingredient in a successful project. You are the more important ingredient, people. So people acting honestly and like adults are the most important ingredients. Surround yourself with highly competent people. Users need to read it, understand it, and apply it. Do we ever read our contracts? I was told my first job, here's a contract. I was told this is a contract. It is only used like this, when you roll it up and you bash a contractor over the head with. That was how I was told we should use contracts. What a load of nonsense. Final slide then. There is minimal case law. Now, there are disputes. There's plenty of adjudication, but that's private. We don't know what goes on there. But there is minimal case law, which I think is good. Lawyers might say it's bad because there's no sort of body of learned legal knowledge. Well, I ask this, why on earth does any client or any contractor in the world want to go to court? Why do you want to have a dispute? Why do you want to fall out? Why do you want to go to court? I think it's a chance to upskill. So we've introduced clauses like whole life costing, early contractor involvement. You can bring in things like earned value analysis, programming. How many of us are good enough at programming? Not many in my experience. So it brings an opportunity for us to get even more competent than we are now. It drives collaboration, great word. We used to use the word partnering. Nobody likes that, so abandon that. Let's use the word collaborate, a great word. It does drive better behavior. What behavior do we want? Adults acting openly and honestly. That's what we're after. You have the right information at the right time, you can make sensible decisions. People hold information back, or worse, lie to you, you're in a bad place. Create better outcomes. That really is the ethos of the contract. Why bother? If you don't create better outcomes, if you use NEC, don't use NEC. So that would be my, my challenge. There's no point to using this if you do not have a significant improvement on what you have now. Any country thinking of using this, my advice is to trial it. Trial it, observe, compare to the norm. Trial existing, compare and learn. And the last point, I suppose the most pertinent one for you guys in Vietnam, but we've got to get our heads around the problems, the needs and interests in Vietnam. This is the mediator in me coming out. So this is the iceberg thing, isn't it? All we ever see is the top of the iceberg. What we've got to understand is what's going on below the surface. What are your needs and interests? How can this contract best help you? We are active, we're very active in this region, despite having a London number, so apologies for that, but never mind. We have what's called APUG, NEC APUG membership. I'm the secretary of the NEC users group. We have, I don't know, 450, 500 member organizations around the world. We've just launched in APUG, Asia Pacific, 2 new memberships, a Jade and a Ruby level. If you want to find out some more about it, look at the website or contact me and I'll be happy to tell you about that. So what are we trying to do? To help people set up and manage NEC contracts even better. The beauty of not using planes anymore is Zoom and MS Teams and the like. We don't actually have to be in the countries as we used to do. Some contact details, and that's me. So let me stop share. Let me hand over to my good friend, Richard. Who needs to put £2
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, another £2 for speaking on mute. This is costing me a fortune. So Trung, were you wanting me to go next? I'm hoping so.
In the program that I have in front of me is next you will be Mr. Lê Thế Hùng.
Okay, that's what I thought. So I will keep quiet.
Sorry, Richard.
That's okay. It's not a problem.
Và bây giờ tôi xin mời ông Lê Thế Hùng, luật sư điều hành CNC Council, thành viên của Ban vận động Hiệp hội Luật xây dựng Việt Nam. Xin mời ông Hùng.
Rất cảm ơn Robert đã có một buổi giới thiệu về net. Thì về phần trình bày của tôi thì tôi sẽ nói về những vấn đề của luật Việt Nam và cái tôi có một cái số đối chiếu so sánh với lại cái hợp đồng net để xem được cái sự phát triển của Việt Nam với net, có cái khả năng mà sử dụng cái hợp đồng net của Việt Nam như thế nào. Thì cái slide này sẽ tập trung vào một số những vấn đề như sau. Thứ nhất đó là giới thiệu về các cái hợp đồng xây dựng mà đang được Việt Nam mình sử dụng, được Việt Nam mình giới thiệu. Thứ hai là mình sẽ đánh giá cách tổng quan về những cái tiến bộ của cái bộ hợp đồng Việt Nam mình giới thiệu so với lại những cái ưu điểm mà như ông Robert có nói về cái hợp đồng net, đó là việc giảm thiểu các cái tranh chấp, việc tăng cường cái khả năng hợp tác của các bên, rồi nó được soạn thảo trên một cái cơ sở một cái ngôn ngữ dễ đọc, mặc dù là Việt Nam chúng ta nó chưa là một ngôn ngữ chính thức về ngôn ngữ tiếng Anh. Rồi chúng ta sẽ đi sang phần thứ ba, đó là có một vài cái lưu ý, một vài cái điểm với cái góc nhìn của người hành nghề luật thì chúng ta thấy được là ở cái luật của Việt Nam của chúng ta cũng cần một cái điểm cần lưu ý. Thứ tư đó là cái hợp đồng về alien contract mà ông Robert có chia sẻ về trường hợp mà chủ đầu tư sẽ ký với lại nhiều bên khác nhau, và trong đó có những cái thỏa thuận về việc là không có xung đột, không có khởi kiện lẫn nhau, không tranh chấp lẫn nhau, đó là cái sự khác biệt khá là nhiều so với lại cái quy định của Việt Nam. Rồi thì phần cuối chúng ta sẽ tập trung vào là những khó khăn khi mà những cái challenge mà chúng ta phải đối mặt nếu như mà chúng ta mong muốn sử dụng cái hợp đồng net ở Việt Nam. Tất nhiên là theo Robert thì cũng chia sẻ là gì, mình sẽ phải áp dụng thí điểm thử một vài tình huống trước khi mà mình có thể đem hợp đồng net vào Việt Nam được áp dụng một cách phổ biến. Tuy nhiên là chúng ta cũng phải nhìn trước những cái khó khăn nhất định của nó. Thì đối với lại cái vấn đề đầu tiên đó là các loại hợp đồng xây dựng tại Việt Nam á, thì như cái slide có trình bày các anh chị đây, thì bộ xây dựng của mình cũng dựa trên cái cơ sở của luật xây dựng đã có ban hành một số những cái mẫu hợp đồng xây dựng, và trong cái nghị định 37/2015 thì chúng ta cũng có đề cập tới rất nhiều những loại hợp đồng khác nhau. Chúng ta có hợp đồng tư vấn, chúng ta có hợp đồng thi công, chúng ta có hợp đồng cung cấp cái thiết bị công nghệ, chúng ta có hợp đồng thiết kế và thi công, chúng ta có hợp đồng thiết kế và cung cấp thiết bị, chúng ta có hợp đồng cung cấp thiết bị và thi công, rồi chúng ta cũng có cái hợp đồng EPC, rồi hợp đồng登記, hợp đồng cung cấp nhân sự ứng nó thiết bị thi công và các loại hợp đồng khác. Thì nếu như mà chúng ta nhìn vào cái quy định tại điều 3 của nghị định 37/2015 của Bộ Xây dựng của chúng ta ban hành, thì chúng ta sẽ thấy đây là gì ạ? Việt Nam chúng ta cũng đã nhìn thấy được những các loại hợp đồng cần thiết và nó cần phải có ở trong cái hoạt động xây dựng của Việt Nam, chứ không phải là không. Chúng ta cũng đã bước được những bước tiến rất rõ ràng, và đồng thời với nó là gì, chúng ta cũng đã biết được là tương ứng với một vài những loại hợp đồng như vậy thì người ta có thể sử dụng cái loại hợp đồng với cái phương thức là giá trọn gói, giá cố định, giá điều chỉnh hay theo thời gian, hoặc là cái việc kết hợp của các loại giá này với nhau. Thì rõ ràng là cái này nó rất là tương đồng với là những gì mà ông Robert có chia sẻ về cái hợp đồng net. Thì chúng ta sẽ thấy ông Robert có chia sẻ trong slide về hợp đồng net thì chúng ta có hợp đồng ESC, ESS, ECC, ECS, rồi SC, rồi Alien Contract, rồi hợp đồng UB, mọi hợp đồng là gần như chúng ta cũng đã phủ đầy đủ được cái số lượng những cái loại hợp đồng mà chúng ta đang có. Và đối với lại cái option sử dụng trong cái hợp net thì chúng ta cũng sẽ thấy được họ vẫn đang cho phép chủ đầu tư có thể lựa chọn những cái loại hợp đồng phù hợp với cái cách thức mà chủ đầu tư sẽ tham gia, hợp đồng với giá cố định, tiến độ công tác thực hiện, hợp đồng với giá cố định và khối lượng. Tức là về cơ bản thì chúng ta cũng đã có hiểu rất rõ về các loại hợp đồng, chúng ta cũng đã hiểu được về cái loại giá của hợp đồng, thì cái giá nó có thể ảnh hưởng tới cho công trình thi công. Và cuối cùng là gì, chúng ta cũng đã chia ra được là chúng ta có hợp đồng chính, hợp đồng cộng phụ, hợp đồng giao khoán nội bộ và các loại hợp đồng đối với nước ngoài. Tức là riêng đối với slide này thì chúng ta thấy được là Bộ Xây dựng, ít nhất là Bộ Xây dựng của mình là có những nỗ lực và đã tiếp cận được với lại những cái thông lệ trên thế giới và hiểu rõ được những cái bản chất và những cái loại hợp đồng cần có trong một cái lĩnh vực trong cái công việc.
Rồi, thì đó là những cái điểm tiến bộ, và chúng ta sẽ thấy nữa là gì ạ? Khi mà đi vào cái công cụ để triển khai cái quá trình thực hiện dự án, ngoài cái quy định trong nghị định 37 thì chúng ta sẽ thấy là gì? Trên thực tế thì các bộ ban ngành của chúng ta cũng đã có được những cái ban hành những cái giới thiệu những cái mẫu hợp đồng. Thì điển hình nhất là gì ạ? Đây không phải là tất cả nhưng mà đây là giới thiệu đấy. Thì Bộ Xây dựng của chúng ta cũng đã có được những cái mẫu hợp đồng về tư vấn được ban hành theo thông tư 08/2016. Hợp đồng về thi công xây dựng, cái hợp đồng mà trực tiếp để thi công theo bản vẽ chẳng hạn, thì chúng ta có thông tư 09. Và để tiến tới được cái hợp đồng mà cho những cái dự án về ngành công nghiệp chẳng hạn, về hóa dầu, về năng lượng, thì chúng ta cũng có được cái mẫu hợp đồng EPC theo thông tư 30/2016. Và gần đây nhất thì khi mà luật xây dựng được sửa đổi thì Bộ Xây dựng cũng đang có cái công tác trong việc điều chỉnh cái nghị định 37/2015, và chắc chắn là sẽ có những điều chỉnh cho các cái mẫu hợp đồng sau. Thì rõ ràng là đối với mẫu hợp đồng thì về mặt Bộ Xây dựng chúng ta đã có được ít nhất 3 cái hợp đồng mà rất quan trọng, có thể nói là đi trải suốt từ quá trình bắt đầu của dự án tư vấn, triển khai thi công và cái sự tham gia của nhà thầu trong giai đoạn ngay lúc đầu, đó là EPC, đó là nhà thầu có thể tham gia sớm vào dự án. Tương tự như vậy ấy, thì đối với Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư của chúng ta thì với chức năng chủ quản là trong việc đấu thầu cho cả đất nước và cho cả tư nhân và nhà nước, thì chúng ta đã ban hành được nhiều hơn những cái thông tư, những cái mẫu hợp đồng mà cần thiết cho từng cái loại hoạt động trong cái quá trình đấu thầu của mình. Thì rất dễ nhìn thấy ở đây là chúng ta có cái hợp đồng dành cho dự án, cái hợp đồng 09/2018 thì chúng ta sẽ thấy được dành cho các cái loại hợp đồng mà sử dụng PPP để chúng ta thi công BOT chẳng hạn, là BOT, VOO chẳng hạn. Thì chúng ta đã thấy được riêng cái phần số 1 thông tư 09 nó đã giải quyết được cái mảng của đầu tư dự án rồi. Trong đó thì chúng ta sẽ thấy được các mẫu hợp đồng khác nhau được ban hành theo cái thông tư khác nhau. Trong đó chúng ta có thông tư 2017 được hiệu chỉnh bởi thông tư 05/2020 về các điều kiện hợp đồng. Rồi chúng ta cũng có cái yêu cầu về hợp đồng dịch vụ tư vấn ở cái thông tư 01/2015. Chúng ta có điều kiện hợp đồng về xây lắp kèm theo cái mẫu thông tư 2003/2015. Cái thông tư này thì chúng ta có thể thấy được là mình thậm chí còn đã bắt kịp, đã học rất là sát với lại những hướng dẫn của ADB trong cái việc là hướng dẫn đấu thầu. Chúng ta đã thấy được là chúng ta những cái bước rất lớn lao trong việc là học hỏi những cái tiến bộ trong cái quá trình hội nhập. Rồi chúng ta cũng có cái phần nữa đó là hợp đồng theo cái thông tư 14/2016 dành cho những cái hợp đồng là phi dịch vụ tư vấn. Đó thì chúng ta sẽ thấy được cái quá trình phát triển của Việt Nam chúng ta là hiện nay chúng ta không có thể nói là chúng ta còn thiếu một vài, nhưng mà chúng ta đã bước được rất là nhiều và đã tiếp cận được những cái tiến bộ của thế giới về các cái quy định của hợp đồng. Chúng ta có quy định trong xây dựng, chúng ta có nghị định cho việc hướng dẫn triển khai các hợp đồng và nghị định hướng dẫn triển khai các dự án, và các bộ ngành của chúng ta thì cũng đã ban hành những cái mẫu hợp đồng khác nhau để giúp cho cộng đồng doanh nghiệp, người dân và nhà nước có thể áp dụng được. Đó. Như vậy là chúng ta sẽ tóm gọn lại được ở đây là gì? Cái việc mà ban hành các quy định kịp thời và giới thiệu được những cái mẫu hợp đồng khác nhau để sử dụng cho thực tế thì nó sẽ giúp được đảm bảo được cái quá trình đấu thầu của mình đúng theo cái nguyên tắc mà chúng ta đang cố gắng mong muốn. Và như ông Robert cũng chia sẻ đấy, mọi thứ cần phải được minh bạch, công khai. Thì đây là một trong những cái yếu tố giúp cho cái việc mà sử dụng cái hợp đồng của chúng ta nó tốt lên. Thứ nữa là chúng ta có cái mẫu hợp đồng nó đa dạng và tùy vào cái nhu cầu khác nhau, tùy vào cái loại giá hợp đồng khác nhau, mối quan hệ của các bên và tùy vào cái công việc khác nhau thì chúng ta có thể lựa chọn những cái mẫu hợp đồng. Đó. Rồi chúng ta cũng thấy ông Robert có nhắc về cái vấn đề là phải cảnh báo trước cho bên kia. Thì cái này Bộ Xây dựng cũng đã có các quy định rõ ràng là mỗi bên cần phải cảnh báo trước cho bên kia về những cái tình huống hoặc cái sự kiện mà có thể dẫn đến việc tăng giá hoặc kéo dài thời gian. Tức là chúng ta đã bước được những bước rất là dài và rất là tiến bộ so với lại thế giới. Rồi đồng nghĩa bên tiếp đó nữa là gì? Chúng ta cũng đã mở rộng được cái cơ chế giải quyết tranh chấp, bao gồm có cả ban xử lý tranh chấp. Như vậy ấy, là cho tới ngày hôm nay thì chúng ta đã thừa nhận những cái cơ chế giải quyết tranh chấp rất phổ biến trên thế giới, chẳng hạn như ban xử lý tranh chấp, chúng ta cũng đã chấp nhận hòa giải, chúng ta cũng đã chấp nhận về trọng tài, và tất nhiên thì tòa án là cái trường hợp mà chúng ta có từ lâu. Thì đấy là những cái điểm rất tiến bộ trong cái quá trình mà chúng ta ban hành cập nhật cái luật. Và thực ra đối chiếu so sánh với lại NEP thì chúng ta thấy có những cái sự tương đồng rất rõ ở đây. Đó là cố gắng ban hành những cái mẫu hợp đồng, những cái quy định mà nó đáp ứng được nhiều hơn những cái yêu cầu của thực tế. Tuy nhiên thì chúng ta cũng cần phải lưu ý một số những cái yêu cầu trong quá trình thực hiện. Đó là gì? Lớn những cái hợp đồng mà chúng ta đang có thì có cái sự chồng lấn nhất định giữa cái mẫu của Bộ Xây dựng và Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư. Thì chúng ta sẽ thấy được là nhiều khi ở ngoài thực tiễn áp dụng thì có thể cái hồ sơ mời thầu thì đang sử dụng cái thông tư 03/2015. Tuy nhiên là khi mà để thương thảo đàm phán hợp đồng thì chúng ta lại có thể phải sử dụng cái thông tư 09/2016 của Bộ Xây dựng, thì có thể nó có sự chồng lấn. Thứ nữa là trong số tất cả những cái mẫu trước đây của Bộ Xây dựng và Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư ban hành ấy, thì có nghị định 48/2010 và sau này là nghị định 37/2015 ấy, thì chúng ta còn thiếu, thực ra chúng ta còn chưa tập trung vào hai cái mẫu hợp đồng quan trọng nữa, đó là hợp đồng thiết kế và thi công, hợp đồng design build, và cái mẫu hợp đồng back to back, cái hợp đồng thầu phụ ấy. Ông Robert có chia sẻ với trường hợp là back to back mà chúng ta đang nói rất thông dụng hiện nay. Thì thực ra hai cái tình trạng này nó giải quyết nhiều cái vấn đề trên thực tế. Đó là khi trường hợp thứ nhất đó là hợp đồng thiết kế và thi công là gì ạ? Khi mà nhà thầu hiện nay muốn tham gia một dự án thiết kế và thi công thì nhà thầu phải được trao những cái quyền nhất định để hỗ trợ chủ đầu tư trong việc là lên cái thiết kế và hỗ trợ chủ đầu tư xin giấy phép. Tuy nhiên thì gần như trong cái giai đoạn đầu của triển khai dự án Việt Nam thì chủ đầu tư thường có một cái thiết kế concept nhất định rồi. cho nên là tới lúc mà nhà thầu vào thì có thể nó có những cái sự chậm trễ, và gần như chúng ta chưa có cái mẫu hợp đồng thiết kế và thi công riêng. Tất nhiên chúng ta có thể vận dụng linh hoạt cái thông tư 09/2016, nhưng mà cái mẫu của cái thông tư của cái thiết kế và thi công thì chúng ta vẫn chưa có. Ngược lại á, thì đối với lại cái mối quan hệ giữa thầu chính thầu phụ thì gần như trước đây chúng ta chưa có cái mẫu nào, dẫn đến việc là trên thực tế là nhà thầu chính thường có những quy định khắt khe quá mức về việc áp dụng cái quy định back to back và chuyển giao cái nghĩa vụ nhiều xuống cho nhà thầu phụ, những người mà trực tiếp phải thực hiện cái công việc. Thì đây là một cái điểm lưu ý mà rất là lớn, và cái cộng đồng sử dụng các hợp đồng của chúng ta cần phải lưu ý để tránh cái trường hợp là xảy ra các tranh chấp. Rồi cái cuối cùng đó là gì ạ? Chúng ta cũng cần phải điều chỉnh một số cái nội dung cho phù hợp, nhất là những trường hợp mà chúng ta sử dụng cái hợp đồng ngoài ngân sách, không phải là vốn ngân sách, vốn mà do tư nhân tự phát triển chẳng hạn. Thì có một số những cái thuật ngữ, những cái quy định mà nếu như chúng ta áp dụng các cái thông tư trên thì nó có thể dẫn đến việc khó hiểu trong quá trình thực hiện. Thì đây chỉ là những cái vấn đề mà trong cái quá trình thực tiễn hành nghề chúng ta thấy được là gì, nó cần phải lưu ý để trước khi áp dụng. Ngoài ra thì có một cái hợp đồng mà chắc chắn chúng ta thừa nhận, đó là cái sự tiến bộ của NEC họ giới thiệu cái hợp đồng Alien Contract để cố gắng được tạo mọi người trong một cái khung và hiểu biết thông tin của nhau, và cố gắng cùng vì một cái mục tiêu chung, cùng vì cái quá trình phát triển của một cái dự án, thì để chúng ta ký một cái hợp đồng chung ở trên đó và không có tranh chấp giữa các bên với nhau, tạo chung một cái động lực, một cái lợi ích. Thì ở đây là một sự phát triển của NEC thì có lẽ là Bộ Xây dựng hoặc Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư thì sẽ còn cần phải nghiên cứu sau nữa, vì cần thời gian. Và nói như ông Robert thì chúng ta phải nghiên cứu và chúng ta phải có những cái thử nghiệm trước khi chúng ta có thể bắt đầu. Và thậm chí nữa là nhiều cái quy định của NEC thì có thể nó cũng còn mới với Việt Nam, cho nên là riêng cái hợp đồng NEC thì nó thực ra là một cái giới thiệu mới, một cái thông lệ trên thế giới, nhưng mà có thể sẽ chưa có thể nào mà cập nhật vào Việt Nam được. Thì cái này là cái điểm lưu ý trong cái quá trình thực hiện. Rồi, vậy thì nếu như mà chúng ta đã thấy được cái sự tương đồng giữa hợp đồng NEC và những cái quy định của pháp luật Việt Nam, cũng như cái mẫu của các bộ ban ngành đã ban hành ra, thì chúng ta sẽ thấy là gì, có nhiều điểm giống nhau, có nhiều những cái điểm tương đồng. Kể cả cái hợp đồng NEC là đã viết rất simplify về ngôn ngữ, đã rất cố gắng để tạo cho ai cũng có thể đọc và hiểu được cái điều khoản hợp đồng và thực thi nó đúng, tránh cái tranh chấp. Và các quy định của thông tư của mình cũng đã có những quy định tương tự như vậy. Tuy nhiên là thực ra khi mà chúng ta đánh giá một cách khách quan về cái quá trình áp dụng hợp đồng NEC thì chắc có lẽ chúng ta sẽ phải lưu ý rằng là gì, hợp đồng NEC hiện tại theo ông Robert thì đã được sử dụng ở khoảng 30 mấy quốc gia rồi, nhưng mà những cái quốc gia mà sử dụng nhiều nhất thì vẫn đang ở trong cái hệ thống pháp luật common law, chúng ta phải thừa nhận như vậy. Trong khi về cơ bản chúng ta vẫn đang, Việt Nam chúng ta vẫn đang theo hệ thống pháp luật là civil law, cho nên là cái quan điểm pháp lý có thể nó khác nhau, và việc áp dụng vận dụng các cái quy định của NEC tại Việt Nam thì chúng ta cũng rất cần lưu ý. Ngoài ra nữa thì gì ạ? Có thể là cái cách quản lý các cái hợp đồng xây dựng, cái quá trình đầu tư xây dựng tại Việt Nam nó có thể những cái khác trong cái quá trình mà áp dụng cái hợp đồng NEC trên thế giới, cho nên là nó cũng có thể là một cái sự khác biệt mà chúng ta có thể nói một cách ngắn gọn là cái thứ hai, có thể là cái văn hóa, cái cách tiếp cận của chúng ta nó khác, cho nên là áp dụng NEC vào Việt Nam sẽ cần phải rất thận trọng. Thứ ba đó là gì ạ? Đúng như cái lời của ông Robert có chia sẻ, đó là các thông tin của hợp đồng NEC tại Việt Nam thì nó chưa nhiều ở những cái vấn đề như thế nào ạ? Về phía cạnh đào tạo cái hợp đồng NEC thì hiện nay ở Việt Nam chúng ta đang có nhiều những cái hoạt động đào tạo hợp đồng FIDIC là chắc chắn, là chúng ta có cả VCAT là cái thành viên của hiệp hội FIDIC, và chúng ta hàng năm thì năm nay thì nó khó khăn về Covid, nhưng mà chúng ta thường có những cái hoạt động đào tạo khác nhau về FIDIC, giới thiệu các cái quy định của FIDIC. Tuy nhiên là hợp đồng NEC thì đang còn khó khăn về cái việc chia sẻ đào tạo. Rồi thực tế là áp dụng tại Việt Nam thì đang có những cái khó khăn, và ngay cả những luật sư và các kỹ sư tại Việt Nam ấy thì sử dụng cái hợp đồng NEC còn rất là hạn chế, chưa nói là chưa bao giờ áp dụng. Thì ra nó dẫn đến việc là hiểu biết giới thiệu cái hợp đồng NEC vào Việt Nam nó sẽ còn những cái khó khăn. Và thậm chí nữa là đối với lại các chủ đầu tư thì thường là họ sẽ không thể nào tự động mà có thể áp dụng cái hợp đồng nét được, trừ khi là họ có một sự trợ giúp từ những cái đơn vị tư vấn, nhất là những đơn vị quản lý đấu thầu hoặc là đơn vị tư vấn, thì họ phải có được quan điểm và sử dụng cái hợp đồng nét ở Việt Nam. Đó thì dẫn đến việc là các cái thông tin của hợp đồng nét ở Việt Nam nó còn tương đối, nó chưa được nhiều, và cần phải có một cái khoảng thời gian nữa để cho các bộ ngành cũng như những người sử dụng tại Việt Nam có thể hiểu biết sâu hơn về quá trình hợp đồng nét. Và cuối cùng nữa là cái hợp đồng nét về alien contract thì chắc chắn là chúng ta cần rất nhiều thời gian để chúng ta có thể áp dụng được cái hợp đồng này. Thì đây là những cái trình bày của tôi đối với lại cái vấn đề của hợp đồng Việt Nam và hợp đồng nét trên cái cơ sở đối chiếu chung, mà không có viện dẫn và đối chiếu trực tiếp giữa hai cái văn bản Việt Nam và nét nhất định. Riêng cái trường hợp của hợp đồng nét, hợp đồng nét về alien là có một sự lưu ý đặc biệt, là vì cái sự phát triển này còn quá mới đối với Việt Nam và chúng ta cần có cái thời gian để chúng ta áp dụng. Xin cảm ơn.
Quý vị khi mà chúng ta tham dự hội thảo thì chúng ta có câu hỏi gì thì chúng ta có thể gõ vào cái phần Q&A trên máy, hoặc là chúng ta sẽ nêu ở cái phần Q&A sau bài trình bày của ông Richard. And now I'd like to invite Richard Patterson, NEC 4 drafter and procurement and NEC specialist, Maud McDonald, fellow of the Institute of Civil Engineers. Richard was part of the drafting team for NEC 4. Richard advised on mod pursuit of the NEC and has worked with the NEC ever since. He advised a small team of their clients on NEC in all sectors. And he also released to a number of publications on NEC. Richard, the floor is yours.
Off the mute. Thank you very much for that introduction. I will share my screen. Do we have my screen okay? Oh, you have my screen. That's good. Okay. So, Mr. Interpreter, please tell me to slow down. Like my friend, Mr. Gerard, I get very enthusiastic about my contract. Okay, sorry, not my contract, the contract. It's clearly not only my contract. So, session now on NEC compared specifically with FIDIC. I'm sure you know that FIDIC is the Fédération Internationale des Ingénieurs Conseils, the International Association of Associations of Consulting Engineers, and they have been publishing contracts for many years. So that's me again, 31 years with Mott MacDonald, starting as a dams engineer. I had the privilege of working as the procurement specialist for a certain dam called Song Bong, up in the hills just to the west of Da Nang, which brought me to Hanoi and Da Nang many times a few years ago. That had to be with FIDIC. In that time, I have become a specialist in NEC particularly, and I spend most of my time leading across Mott MacDonald in helping our people use NEC in various parts of the world. In fact, nearest to you is Hong Kong, and I am very proud of helping to take our NEC experience from UK to Hong Kong, where we now have a team who have very good experience with NEC. I start with a question for everybody listening in, whether you're in the room or whether you're online. What are the most dangerous words in the English language? If I was in a training room, I would pause dramatically and expect you to come up with some answers. But that's not going to work here. So I'll tell you my answer. The most dangerous words in the English language, we always do it this way. We're not going to listen to different ideas. We're just going to carry on doing what we've always done. And in the international market, particularly in the market where clients are borrowing money from the international financing institutions like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, you have to use FIDIC. because we tell you you have to use FIDIC. You borrow my money, you have to use FIDIC. And that's why across the world, many people use FIDIC. And they will carry on using FIDIC unless they listen to an alternative. And that's what Rob and I are here today for, is to give you that alternative. Similar to Rob, that's my basic plan. The early sessions in here will be very quick because I'm repeating what Rob has told you, but maybe with a few slightly different twists, different things. Then specifically NEC compared with FIDIC, a few lines about where NEC has been used globally, and I will not bore you with the Mott MacDonald expertise. Rob showed you the 3 core principles of NEC, and right from the start, from way back in NEC 1, Martin Barnes, leading his team, said we want to aim for these 3 things: flexibility, clarity, and stimulus to good management. So clarity and simplicity. I don't need to say anything. I just need you to see the sort of language that is used in FIDIC contracts. I am an English speaking, mother tongue English, 25 years experience as a procurement specialist, and I have no chance of understanding that single sentence. NEC, Rob's already said, the contractor provides the works in accordance with the works information. This is actually NEC 3. I really should update my slide. It's now called scope, but that is a detail. The contractor designs the parts of the works which we tell him to design. FIDIC, as we'll see, has a starting point assuming either the employer or the contractor designs everything. That is never the case in the real world. In NEC, huge flexibility. We tell the contractor which parts of the works they have to design. As Rob said, everything is in the present tense. The contractor submits, the project manager accepts. The whole contract is written as a series of things that proper grown-up people do. It's a series of steps to manage your contract. All the way through the contracts, we state reasons for not accepting, and the project manager must use one of those reasons for not accepting. Otherwise, the contractor will have a compensation event, a chance, as we'll see, for more time or more money. Rob told you this picture. He had a different picture, but a similar picture. The only benefit of this picture is that at least I have the full words for each contract, but the same principle as Rob's picture, the same message. We have a suite, a family of documents that uses very similar structure and language to do anything that you could possibly want a contract for. Basically on the picture, this is the space in which we need contracts. Again, similar to Rob's, high level, high complexity is the big contract, which we are talking mainly about, the engineering and construction contract. Shorter contracts and others. That was NEC 3. Those are the new members that came in NEC 4. I am not going to bore you with the detail, but you have the slides to take away to look at after the event. That's my nice picture. I've drawn that picture 20 years ago, and normally we talk through each of these different stages. I just like pictures. I'm an engineer. So you can see, if you have children at home that play with Lego, the NEC contract is like a Lego kit. You pick and choose the pieces you want to build your contract in the way you want for your particular project, your particular deal. As Rob said, we start with core clauses. You choose, the orange are things that are in my contract. You choose one payment option. You choose one dispute resolution option. You can pick and choose as many of those secondary options that Rob talked to you about as you like. If you're in the UK, you might choose one of the UK options, and then option Z, you might choose to do different things. An immensely flexible contract. And it just needs, it needs well-trained people to understand the flexibility and decide what flexibility is required for your, which options are required for your particular contract. Stimulus to good management. Again, as Rob said, I am giving a training after this session. It's very early in the UK here. After this session, I have a full day of training to give an introduction to NEC properly. Here I have just half an hour, and 4 simple things for good management. Number 1, communications. The main criticism of NEC is that it needs too many communications, too much management. And what is quite funny is maybe not the right word, but the new FIDIC 2017, amazingly has been criticized because it's trying to catch up with NEC. It now wants more formal communications. There are now more formal time bars. There are now more formal processes. This was the case for NEC at the very start, clear communications. Accepted program, absolutely critical in NEC. Perhaps a criticism on a significant size NEC contract, you will need people who have planning expertise. The program is at the heart of good project management. We all know that. That is reflected in the way NEC is designed and run. Early warning. In training, I always say, are you married? Have you got a girlfriend? What do you do if you have a problem? The answer, early warning. Maybe in your marriage, you do not need to have an early warning register. Maybe it would be a good idea. Early warning is simply a process of prompting people to share the problems so that both sides can come together and sort out the problems. Very simple process, very clear language. And then compensation events. In FIDIC, there are numerous clauses all over the contract where you can claim extra money, in some cases extra money and time, in some places extra money and time and profit. In NEC, we only have the word compensation event. For the contractor to get any more time or money, they have to first show that a compensation event has occurred. So the language, again, is very clear and very simple. A little more on those compensation events because they are critical. As you will appreciate, a compensation event is a key element in risk allocation. Remember, if it is not a compensation event, the contractor will not get any more time or money. And therefore, the compensation events is the risk allocation device in the contract. Most of these compensation events are in one place in the contract. One of the beauties I have of doing things online nowadays, I wouldn't be able to do this if I was there with you in Vietnam in a training room, but I can just show you, this is the way the contract looks. The following are compensation events, and there is a list of compensation events. The project manager gives an instruction. The project manager or supervisor do not reply to a communication within the period required by the contract. So if the project manager is slow, is not good at project management, there will be a compensation event, for example. But my point here is that the compensation events are just in a straightforward list. You know where to find them. It's very simple. And for all the compensation events, we assess time and cost. They are all managed in exactly the same way. If the project manager wants a new coffee machine for the site office, or if the project manager wants a new ward in the new hospital, the process for assessing it is exactly the same. And critically, these costs are based on the real effect of the event. They are not based on the tendered rates and prices within the document. FIDIC and we are all used to using the rates and prices as the starting point for our evaluation of a change. But we all know in the real world, the contractor will say, oh no, that rate, that's not applicable. No, that was for a different time of the month, or something is different. So then we argue about, can we use the rate? And then in FIDIC, eventually, there is the opportunity to use the real cost. In NEC, it is different. The starting point is we will assess based on the real cost of the event. And this to me is the most critical word in the whole of the NEC. We do not wait and see. We assess based on a forecast of the effects of the compensation event on the effect of the compensation event on the situation as it is today. And for that assessment, as we'll see in just on the next slide, there is a very clear and time-bound process for doing and making that assessment. I've just introduced this slide as a new one for me. This was yesterday. That's the key difference for me. This clause 63.1, the forecast. In FIDIC, if we have a variation or a claim, we keep records. FIDIC is good at telling everybody to keep records. We wait until it's all happened and we try and sort it out later. In NEC, it's a compensation event. We assess it now and based on the forecast effects of the event. I shout the word now because that is so different in NEC. And that is why we need significant resources in the project management team to make those assessments and do those deals for each compensation event. I'll show you the timescales. So say the project manager changes the scope, then they notify that a compensation event has happened because they have just changed the scope. Therefore, they instruct a quotation. The contractor has 3 weeks to provide a quotation. The project manager has 2 weeks to reply. That reply, we hope, will be accept because the project manager and the contractor are talking with each other. They have already worked together to develop the quotation, we hope. If not, the project manager can not agree and ask for a revision. And if the project manager finds that is not working, the project manager has the power to step in and make the assessment themselves. If that is the case and the contractor does not like the project manager's assessment, the next stage is the dispute resolution process. On the other side of the slide, if the contractor finds an event, they have no more than 8 weeks to notify that event. The project manager has an extra stage now. They have 1 week to say no or give me a quotation. And then everything else is the same on the right-hand side of the process. So you can see a very clear time-bound process for doing the deals for the compensation event. There's also sanctions in the contract. If the project manager does not do what they are required by the contract to do, the contract gives the contractor the right to say, excuse me, Rob, project manager, you've not responded on time. If they do that, then the project manager has a further 2 weeks. Otherwise, the submission is treated as accepted. So very clear time-bound process for dealing with problems. Everybody in the room, everybody online, you know that the problem with projects, the problem with contracts is change. If we had no change on our projects, they would be very boring. NEC is basically a change and risk management contract. We said NEC had those 3 core principles. Remember, clarity, flexibility, project management. I think if Martin Barnes had written the NEC today, his team would have added collaboration. Across the world, everyone is looking for better collaboration and wanting their contract to support better collaboration. In NEC, the basic contract, those processes I've just talked about, cause collaboration, or at least help collaboration. As Rob has told us, we can set out additional key performance incentives to encourage collaborative behavior. A massive thing that NEC has, which FIDIC does not yet have. I was on a call 2 days ago with the chief executive of FIDIC, and apparently FIDIC is planning, wait for it, a collaboration contract. I am really looking forward to that. Not really. NEC, we have a target cost contract, which inherently encourages collaboration, because suddenly both client and project manager, sorry, client and contractor have a joint incentive to keep costs down and to manage risks jointly. Target contracts on the big projects are becoming very much more common, certainly in the UK. And as Rob said, there's a benefit also that the open book nature is valued also by many clients. So when I say open book, we mean that the client can see the real cost. Also mentioned by Rob, NEC has this clause, this option for what we call early contractor involvement, which is where we bring a contractor into the team earlier than usual, and working with the contractor, we build up our contract effectively. We agree together, we finalize the scope. The contractor may well do most of the design. In parallel, we build up the forecast of cost and then are able to set a target price. X12, again mentioned by Rob, if we have lots of separate contracts on the same project, X12 gives the client the opportunity to set up incentives which are project-wide and therefore encourage collaboration. And at the very top of the tree, also mentioned by Rob in the same way, the ultimate for collaboration is NEC's new alliance contract. Main pitfalls for management, it does need management. NEC will not run itself. It needs competent people and it needs some investment from you as a client to get that better project management. That ongoing agreement of change does not come for free. It needs competent people. It needs competent planners, competent quantity surveyors, cost consultants. But by doing all that, you will have what I like to call incremental certainty. I'm not sure how well that translates, but we can see where the project is going as we go along. You cannot put the contract in the drawer. To make all that work, those are the things we need to address. Finally, I get to what you wanted to hear about. I'm sorry. NEC compared with FIDIC. Fundamentally, in terms of overall style, FIDIC, as it has always been, you may remember, you probably won't know, but the original FIDIC contracts were based on original UK Institution of Civil Engineers contracts, and they have been around for years and written in a very similar way. And as Rob has said, they have developed and been added to over the years. The difference with NEC is that it was started from a blank sheet of paper. It is, I I am unusual perhaps that I am an NEC specialist. I am almost as passionate about NEC as is my good friend Rob Gerard, but I have also had to spend a lot of my life working with FIDIC contracts because I work for Mott MacDonald. We do big contracts internationally and we are forced to use FIDIC mainly by the banks. The NEC, as I hope I've shown you, requires and enables more proactive and joint management of the contract. Now, clarity. To be fair, the 1999 update was much better than previous editions of FIDIC. And as I've said, the new FIDIC 2017 claims to be much more management focused. There are more time cutoff periods. There are more requirements to do things much quicker and in a stated period, which is good. And as Rob said, I think it's a good reflection on NEC that FIDIC is trying to catch up with NEC to do those things. But the new FIDIC Red Book, which is the BOQ book, has 50,000 words. Apparently, obviously we don't have hard copies anymore, but the hard copy weighs more than a kilogram. That's crazy, crazy in my humble opinion. NEC, clarity, simplicity is a guiding principle. And as we've seen, and I've shown you on screen, it's written in simple, plain English. This is probably the most important slide for the detail. So this is a comparison of the range of contracts between both FIDIC and the NEC. So for a consultancy contract, FIDIC for 50 years has had the white book. What we give you from NEC is the professional services contract or the professional services short contract. That C should be an S, I'm sorry. For works, this is the most important, probably the most important part of the whole presentation. A works contract for NEC, we have the ECC, the engineering and construction contract. FIDIC gives you 3 separate contracts. To be fair, FIDIC has tried to bring the words of those contracts to be more comparable in the same way that NEC started. And we'll talk about the details of those on the next slide. FIDIC has a subcontract for the Red Book. Actually, I need to update my slide because FIDIC has recently produced a subcontract to the 1999 Yellow Book. NEC has the engineering construction subcontract, and Rob mentioned it. Maybe I can emphasize it more. The subcontract uses exactly the same words as the main contract. It passes on risks, processes directly to the subcontractor using the same words, which just makes so much sense. FIDIC comes from a construction world and does not have a contract for physical services. NEC does, the term service contract. FIDIC, to be fair, I like to keep saying I must be fair to FIDIC. FIDIC has had the FIDIC Gold Book for design, build and operate for some time. I've used it. NEC now in NEC 4 has its own contract for design, build and operate, using the same language, the same processes as all of these contracts we've talked about before. FIDIC doesn't seem to have caught up with the world and the need for a framework contract. NEC has that framework contract. Remember, a framework is a contract which sets up the process to award separate contracts later under NEC contracts. And we have the alliance. And this is where I have to admit, almost to cry, that NEC has not yet developed a joint venture agreement, which is crazy, because in the world, the only starting point for a standard form of joint venture agreement that I understand, that I am aware of, is FIDIC. So if we have 2 big contractors getting together to build a massive project in Vietnam using the engineering construction contract, their starting point for a joint venture will probably be the FIDIC joint venture agreement. That's something wrong. Rob and we need to sort that out. So again, works contracts, FIDIC Red Book. On my scale here, I like pictures, remember? Level of price certainty. So in terms of price certainty, as you know, with a remeasurement contract, it's not a lump sum, but we have got tendered rates for doing the work. So the client is still taking the risk of the quantities, but the bidder has given us tendered rates. On the x-axis, the extent of design by the contractor, and generally the red book is intended for where the employer has done most of the design, therefore not much design by the contractor. FIDIC yellow book goes up the scale because normally it's done with a lump sum. But interestingly, the FIDIC yellow book doesn't tell you how to manage that lump sum. It just says, write yourself a pricing schedule. So every consultant and every client writes their own different pricing schedule. Crazy, criminal waste of money. Use a contract which has that pricing mechanism for lump sum as part of its document. In FIDIC, you can go further to the silver book, which is really very, very similar to the yellow book, except that more risk is pushed across to the contractor, mainly and clearly the physical condition risk. So design by the contractor. If you have been listening to Rob and you will know the NEC contract, the ECC, Engineering and Construction contract, this is the construction contract. The contractor can be asked to do any level of design because you have to tell them in your scope what they are required to design. And in terms of pricing mechanism, you've also heard from Rob and from me that we have these different pricing options just given by a letter. So if you want lump sum design and build, you could have FIDIC, or you could use the ECC option A. If you want a silver book type approach, you use option A, you tell the contractor to design everything, and you delete the compensation event for physical conditions to make that risk with the contractor. Very simple. If you really want a bill of quantities contract, you use option B. And more radically, as we've said, if you want to encourage collaboration, think about using the target contract, preferably option C. There's a lot of information in that slide. I hope it's clear to people. Please come back with questions. For smaller works, FIDIC has the green book, which is lump sum or remeasurement. And guess what? The NEC has the short contract, which can also be a mix of lump sum and quantities. And interestingly, when that contract was drafted, Martin Barnes at the same time was helping the World Bank. And if you've used the World Bank's smaller contracts, you will recognize words like compensation event and early warning. They were stolen from NEC as the NEC was being drafted. I've probably said all this before, so I will be quick, but not too quick for the interpreter. Stimulus to good management, that's what I want to emphasize. That's what Martin Barnes said was by far the most important objective of NEC. It's a specific objective. We have specific actions, specific timescales for specific people. Early warning. In FIDIC, there is a requirement to give early warning, but no follow-up process, no clarity. Now, I should be clear. My comments here are based on FIDIC 1999. Maybe they've improved things. I haven't caught up yet. NEC's, the early warning process is hugely important. I haven't got time to explain the detail, but there is effectively a penalty within the contract if the contractor does not give the early warning. In FIDIC, the contractor is required to give a program. The project manager may or may not comment, and that's it. It doesn't say what you do with the program. I assume the FIDIC engineer might take the program into account in assessing extensions of time, but it doesn't say so. In NEC, there is a detailed use of the accepted program to assess the delay to the required date for completion. And emphasizing again, change management, FIDIC is littered with different provisions, different remedies for different types of event. NEC, everything's in the same place. They're called a compensation event. They're all dealt with by the same process, the slide of which I explained, and we've got the same rules and timescales. Because of that, client and contractors management, they know where the project is going. All of which assumes that we are actually doing the contract properly, and that's the big risk. I'm just going to literally flick through some slides on globally, just some nice pictures. Hong Kong, we've been using it there in Mott MacDonald since 2011. Vast range of contracts for many clients. As Rob has said, it is now mandatory in construction in the public sector to use NEC. South Africa, big user. New Zealand and Australia, very, very small uses in Australia at the moment, but Rob and I are very excited to see it's taking off. Rob is in Hong Kong, partly to be able to be better there for NEC to service the Australian market. And only just last year, Sydney Water chose NEC for its new procurement program. It has been used in Europe, mainland Europe, but very few contracts, to be honest. This was one big one. And as mentioned by Lisa at the start, very exciting that we have this contract in these games in Peru last year. Damn, I shouldn't have done that. No, go back, hang on, number lock, take that one off, go back up a slide. Damn, I've jumped too early. What I wanted to say is that in my day job today, I am helping the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office with a NEC short contract in Myanmar, in Burma. That will be the first use of the contract in Burma. And I'm also helping a Spanish contractor bid for the next big project in Peru. The Peruvian government has learnt so much from this one you see on the slide that they want to use it again for major projects. And obviously, we're very keen to help make that happen. And I think that's the best slide to leave you with. Do you think this will work in Vietnam? Do you want to try to make it work in Vietnam? And I will stop. Thank you very much.
For outlining the differences between NEC and FIDIC, and I like your note on the weight of the FIDIC contract and the simple and plain languages used in the NEC contract. And now comes the Q&A sessions. For this session, I'd like to ask Mr. Chung help. And we are running out of time a little bit, so we might have shorter time for the Q&A. Mr. Chung.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Okay. Thank you very much. Vietnam, can you mute, please? And hello, Robert. We have some questions already. So could you please start with your questions from the floor? If there is a construction contract with a price of 5 million USD, or the contractor delay about 12 or 24 months, not because of force majeure, how much the compensation in NEC? And the people afraid that if no delay damage, then it will let the contractor rest obligation for a long time.
Yeah. I love long time. Love that. I love that. Okay, let me have a go. There are so many questions that I would have to be able to answer this question properly, but I get what they're saying. And I think this probably came because of my talk when I said you do not have to have delay damages or therefore liquidated damages. Now, I would approach it this way. Imagine we have a lump sum contract, and imagine there is no Richard talked in more detail than I did about compensation events. So no force majeure type compensation event, no fault of the client. Let's say the fault of the contractor. So the contractor is delayed by 12 to 24 months. So that's how I'll try and answer this question. Lump sum contract, ECC option A, no compensation events, delays the fault of the contractor. If you believe what I said earlier and look at those comfort blankets and get rid of that one which is delay damages, the question then says, so how do we control the contractor? How is the contractor motivated to finish early? Well, they're motivated to finish early because of a number of things. One, reputation. Maybe that doesn't bother them too much, but I hope it did. Two, that they will lose a lot of money, a serious amount of money in terms of their preliminaries and their staff costs over that 12 to 24-month period. They probably lose far more money than you will retain from them with delay damages. They're going to get hit from two angles. One, their increased own costs as a result of their own delay. Two, they get hit for delay damages. Not a great position for a contractor to be in. I've never, ever known a contractor deliberately breach their obligations for such a period of time. It is absolutely not in their best interests. Why would you do that? That's a suicidal mission, and you will end up being bankrupt and having no organization.
I would agree with Rob there. As always, Rob is right. But I do recognize that many clients, as much as we like to have only the positive incentives, we can be as collaborative as we like. But if we do not have delay damages, then there is always the risk that the contractor will put his resources to another project where maybe there is more delay damages, there is more direct need to finish on time. So personally, I would normally advise a client that I would still, maybe I'm just old-fashioned. Rob will tell me I'm old-fashioned, but I would still advise a client to have that Rob's comfort blanket of delay damages.
So, what
Let's
you do
leave it at
if I might reply, what you do in that situation then is increase the risk on the contractor, who will push their price up in the first place, and they will change their behavior. Their behavior is now very defensive. Every time a problem occurs, they will look to push out aggressively the completion date. So do they work? It's very, very old-fashioned thinking.
Okay.
Sure. I'll shut up now, Tron.
Hello. I would like to come to the next question. The next question will be, if NEC is so good, why the World Bank or Multilateral Development Bank, MDB, mandates it you on their fund project? This question comes from Singip. Yes.
Good morning, Sean. Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for a great question. I have no idea. You need to ask the World Bank or the multilateral development banks. They are crazy people. It's not modern day thinking. So I think there's a place for FIDIC. There's a place for NEC. I'm not saying don't use FIDIC. I would say use FIDIC for the right reasons, use NEC for the right reasons, but think about the reasons. Think about the right contract to fit your particular project. NEC is, one size does not fit all. NEC should not be used for everything. FIDIC should not be used for everything. Now, I was told this some time ago, quite a while now. How true it is, Richard might dispel this myth, but I was told that the World Bank thinks that everybody in the world is corrupt apart from the expat British engineer, and they put that person in control of the FIDIC contracts because everybody else is corrupt in their eyes. So they have a really jaundiced view of the world. I think they now realise that actually open book contracting, which is why FIDIC will produce one, I'm sure eventually, because they're going to get left behind. Open book contracting helps with transparency, helps with anti-corruption, is the way forward. So,
the answer, I think, to Sean's question, and I'm being slightly cynical, is that FIDIC has been better at developing relationships with the banks than NEC has. And they have a long-standing relationship. As you know, FIDIC and the banks did a deal for FIDIC to publish the bank version of the FIDIC Red Book, which is known as the Pink Book. And that has been, so FIDIC was made that publicly available for free. And that's part of the arrangement. I don't know how it works. I'd love to see the details of the deal between FIDIC and the banks. But I just hope that in time they will see the light. At least, as Robert said, there is no reason to force people to do things one particular way. My opening slide was about opening up your eyes to look at different possibilities. Stop.
Okay, the last question. We have the last question. From Mr. Ngô Duy Hương. In alliance contract, if the party agree to have no dispute, then the worst event that it happened, any mechanism for which the party settle the dispute? Alliance contract.
They just because you're using an alliance contract does not mean you will not get disputes. Of course you will get disputes. You know, me and Richard have just had a small dispute about using delay damages or not. And he's wrong, I am right. But
I'll take you to court.
Yeah, you will always have disagreements, won't you? It's about what you can do with that dispute and where you can take it. Now, you still can have a dispute with the alliance contract, but ultimately you take that dispute to what's called the alliance board, who will either refer that dispute to an independent expert for an opinion, or will push that dispute in front of senior representatives, and that probably through mediation they would sort that out. The point being, it goes no further than that. The alliance board, we will have to decide that dispute within the alliance board. It will not be passed out to arbitration or litigation.
Okay. So I apologize for speaking too long, clearly, and not letting you have enough time for questions. So Rob will shoot me. I do hope that we encourage questions on the chat box and in writing. And I would be happy to help answer those questions.
You're such a charmer.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Robert, Hung, and Richard. So we stop the conference here. And you all have my contacts, my colleagues now in Ho Chi Minh City contacts, and our colleagues at the Ministry of Construction. So if any further information or questions or anything you need, let us know. So thank you very much. And I hope that when COVID is getting better, we could have the actual conference instead of the online or through Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Well done, Richard.
And
I'm
you,
impressed
matey.
with Nam, the interpreter, who's kept that
Brilliant.
pose fantastically well for 2 hours now.
All right, I've got to go. I'm on at 9 o'clock. Bye now.
Bye, Richard.